What's up, y'all? I'm Marcus, also known as ENB. This is the Immortal Poison Arrow, resurrection of the best damn gaming podcast ever. Okay, well, maybe not the best, but it's spicy. It's gonna be spicy today. Stay tuned immediately following Immortal Poison Arrow for ENB Radio as well, with a selection of great tracks from a selection of great games. And speaking of selecting things, to select the news topics that people would be interested in, I asked, people on Twitter for topics. Let's go. This is from Sun Oaks on Twitter. And Sun Oaks wanted me to talk about the Doom composer Kerfluffle. Okay, so to summarize this for people who haven't heard about it, the composer of the recent Doom game wasn't happy about some quality issues on the soundtrack and responded to criticism he received on Twitter by blaming id. People then began harassing the id employee who worked on the soundtrack. This prompted id's executive producer to respond, and he detailed how the composer was late on delivering the tracks for the OST, even after extension. Id scrambled internally to meet fan expectations as best they could in light of that. At the end of the day, my take is that if id's response is the whole truth, the composer handled everything unprofessionally. If he felt the need to respond to criticisms of the soundtrack, he should have worked together with id to do so publicly without subjecting individual devs to online hate because he couldn't make the deadlines he agreed to. But that assumes that everything id said was true and that it was the whole truth. And usually these sorts of situations arise when other issues have already eroded trust and communication has broken down. And there's no way for the unrelated public or media to know the truth, and anyone who is lashing out at individuals over this is honestly a bit naive. Now, that doesn't mean people can't be pissed about the quality issues. If they want to demand refunds or boycott future id games as a result, that's understandable, though I have to say it's sad too. Games are hard to make. A ton of people work on them, and most of those people genuinely do their best. Sometimes they do a lot more than they should, but just because everyone does their best doesn't mean that things always turn out perfectly. That's the nature of these massive productions. So when you buy a game or other product, know that many of the flaws are known to the creators too, and you won't hear the reasons for those flaws. That's a part of professionalism. You take care of the people that you work together with, and they take care of you, and everyone owns the mistakes. Of course, the public wants to know every dirty little detail of what went wrong on a production, but that would be very destructive to the lives and careers of individual developers, which oftentimes things were beyond their control anyway. Like, they didn't have control over it. So to sum it up, it ain't none of my goddamn business, and I have no opinion. Black Trim on Twitter said, the future of E3 and other consumer-faced secondary gaming infrastructures, and the Rained said, why E3 is now dead. So questions about E3 and other trade shows. Long story short, major publishers can get the attention they need while still having more control over reveals if they do them internally, digitally, via streams and trailers. Nintendo has been doing that for some time now with its directs. And speaking of Nintendo, their president, Furukawa-san, recently reassured investors that there are a number of unannounced games currently in development for Nintendo. Some people have been worried about the lack of announcements, but, there's a global pandemic, and working from home is a real challenge for the gaming industry. Nintendo is holding its cards until they are ready to lay them on the table for everyone to see, so there's games coming. Furukawa-san also mentioned that the Switch just entered the middle of its life cycle. So if you were hoping for Nintendo to update hardware anytime soon, it ain't happening. It ain't happening. But frankly, Nintendo's strengths, that it's in their IPs, their brand loyalty, and that they have some very passionate first-party developers too. System specs are kind of a lesser concern for them. They're also positioned with a handheld device here due to the Switch's nature. So the Switch, it's going to be around for a while. It's going to be around for a while, man. Ubisoft will be doing their own version of this with Ubisoft Forward on July 12th, and a number of other companies will be taking part in Summer Game Fest between May and August. Honestly, the pandemic was a factor in the cancellation of E3 and TGS this year, but these shows have kind of been weakening for a while. The main point of them has kind of actually returned to its original purpose of being an industry event in some ways, with a lot of the big conversations kind of taking place behind the scenes in private venues. But who's to say that absence won't make the heart grow fonder? And maybe this is a larger musing here, but far beyond the games industry, I wonder how many people will really kind of wake from their slumber once the pandemic is no longer a threat. I mean, just for me, I personally feel more motivated to get out and be more sociable than ever before. And I'm quite the introvert. But I think this year is definitely one for people to figure out what's really important in their lives. And who knows if E3 and Tokyo Game Show will be important to enough people. Oh, one more company that has set the bar high for itself is Capcom. They're aiming for multiple major releases in this fiscal year, so between now and March of 2021. This comes from their publicly released financial strategy statement. And they do make mention of COVID-19 in their statement, particularly when addressing esports and how competitions will be held online. But I'm not sure they are taking it seriously enough. They seem to be predicting increased demand, but we literally may be staring down a prolonged recession here. At the end of the day, though, what's it mean for you? More Capcom games, and ones with names that you'll probably recognize. A more fascinating note to me is that Capcom now has a workforce of around 2,150 people. 2,150. 900 plus new graduates hired over the past 9 years. That's a lot. And there's lots of different ways that can go. I mean, you can look at this as fresh new blood that grew up playing and loving Capcom's older games, now free to work with the IPs. Maybe. Or will it mean uneven quality between releases, as some have complained between Resident Evil 2 Remake and Resident Evil 3 Remake? That's going to depend a lot on their training and how they use all those younger hires. They've been on a major role, so I'm inclined to give them the benefit of the doubt. And by that, I mean, bring back Breath of Fire, you fucking cowards. Also, well done with Mega Man 11. Can we get a new Mega Man X game that is as faithful? From sodium peroxide on Twitter, sorry. What are you excited about for the new gen that is not hardware dependent? Well, let me tell you a little story. I started out on the NES, and then I moved on to the SNES, and I was also fortunate enough to get my hands on a Sega CDX thanks to running a fireworks stand. Then I had a PlayStation 1, which I got for Final Fantasy VII. I had a PlayStation 2, which I got for Final Fantasy X. I got a PS3 for Demon's Souls, and I only bought the PlayStation 4 for Bloodborne. I tell you this story just so you'll get me when I say I care about games, not systems. I don't care in general about consoles. I buy them when I have to because of exclusive games. These days, I have a nice PC for playing games, and it is always my preference for convenience and performance. So essentially, exclusive IPs and providing access to older libraries via backwards compatibility, which is a value, is all that console makers can do to force me to buy their stuff. But as long as they fund the development of games that I want to play, then I'll eventually end up buying consoles. Well, specifically PlayStations. Xbox isn't needed for me because their games are all on PC, so yeah. Speaking on PlayStation Studios. Sony has unveiled a new logo for their first-party titles. For now, it seems like a rebranding of their first-party IPs. Whether or not this ends up being a rededication to investment in first-party titles or just some sort of vanity rebrand, that remains to be seen. I worked on a case study in grad school that looked into the keys for success for gaming consoles, and one of the big talking points at that time was how other consoles needed to emulate Nintendo's approach with the Wii. From a business perspective, many industry outsiders approach the analysis as motion controls equal money. I argued against that logic, taking the stance that Sony and Microsoft couldn't easily replicate Nintendo's success with the Wii. Yes, Nintendo was picking up a lot of players that would be difficult to pull in with traditional control schemes, but they also had IPs and in-house developers that could effectively leverage motion-controlled games. And in my view, it wasn't enough to simply have motion controls. You also needed the right games for it, with the right characters and made by the right people. And that takes more than just money. It takes time and commitment. And my perspective on Sony and Microsoft was that they both needed to focus on first-party development and build strong partnerships with other software developers. And I still hold this view. A lower price point than comparable PCs, ease of use / convenience, and exclusive titles are required for the next generation of consoles to be relevant. In other words, at the end of the day, people buy game consoles because there are games they want to play. It's all about the games. And one major topic right now is the latest Unreal Engine and a focus on making it easier to produce so-called AAA games. That's something I want to save for another day, though, as we have a lot of other things to discuss here. But at the end of the day, Xbox isn't relevant to me because I have a PC. The Switch is going to be around for a while still, like Nintendo said it would. So it pretty much comes down to Sony funding exclusive to make it worth the purchase for me. And we'll see if PlayStation Studios is a sign of that in due time. Holdsworth Hands on Twitter asked a question that I've been getting asked a lot here recently. I've been ducking it and dodging it and dipping and ducking and ducking and dodging and dicking around. I've been trying to stay away from answering this fucking question so bad. I don't want to answer it. And in fact, I had written a 2,000-page rant answering this question, and I was like, no, you're going too hard. Dial it back. Just be calm. So I ended up cutting it down to just a couple paragraphs. It ends up being 1,400 words. Holdsworth Hands asked for my thoughts on the Final Fantasy VII Remake. The following comments will contain spoilers, so just dip out for like 10 minutes. And bounce back in like 10 minutes if you want to duck these spoilers. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but yeah, there's no way to do this without spoiling some shit. So that's your warning. I don't like Nojima's writing at all. Every piece of fiction has a bullshit budget. And you start off with credit. After all, the player spent money on your thing. They want to like it. So you have credit. But every time you ask the player to suspend their disbelief with some improbable or cliched plot element, you spend some of that budget. Amnesia, mind control or spirit possession due to alien DNA, contagious premonitions of future events. All these things eat into your bullshit budget. Now, some things have a huge cap. Resurrection is one of them. If you bring back the dead, that's it. That's kind of what your story's about now. You've cheapened the ultimate consequence of life, and you better have a good reason for it. If an important character's death is the climax of your story, you might want to stay away from having a resurrection element. I mean, a clever writer might introduce the possibility of resurrection just to heighten the dramatic effect of the big death, by denying the possibility of resurrection for that character. But they would have to be very careful in how it was set up, and once again, it would need to be the main point of the work. Now, time travel has an infinite cap. If your story has time travel, your story is about time travel. It's extremely hard to do right. If you combine a socially awkward amnesiac protagonist whose unreliable perspective gives you free rein to mislead your audience with alien DNA-powered mind control and characters that can seemingly teleport or pass through objects with contagious premonitions of the future, and suddenly introduced resurrection elements that can really only exist to demonstrate the power of your time-traveling ghosts that can easily be taken as a meta-allegory for player expectation, you've got a shitty fucking story, mate. You're over the bullshit budget, big time. Nojima has used a lot of these elements before, like in Final Fantasy VIII. They actually worked better there because he wasn't trying to be meta about it. But, you say, hey, this is the writer of Kingdom Hearts. His stories work great. Sure they do, as long as you give him an infinite bullshit budget. And everybody has a different tolerance to it. But you say, he never used the, but it was a dream twist. Well, slow down, bucko. Nojima wrote for Final Fantasy X and X-2, so yeah, there's your dreamboat. And then he actually connected the world of Spira with the world of Gaia from Final Fantasy VII. So yeah, Nojima kind of has it so that Final Fantasy X and X2 are connected to Final Fantasy VII. Yeah, that's actually a thing. The whole we have to fight against fate thing too, well, yeah, he did the scenario concept for Final Fantasy XIII as well. Truth is, the writing in most of the games that Nojima is credited on follows a pretty basic pattern. It prioritizes twists over being grounded. It's similar to a lot of comic writing. Anything is justified as long as the reader didn't see it coming. And we can always just make it a multiverse sort of thing. At least the VII Remake didn't tease anything like that. Oh, wait. Oh, it kind of did, didn't it? The thing that really disappoints me more than anything is that the worst story elements were also completely unnecessary. It felt like they had the need to explain that things were going to be different from the original instead of just letting things be different. just let it be different, man. You don't have to explain it. just let it be different. There were some really awesome parts, man. I loved how Shinra's political machinations were fleshed out. I really loved that. I thought taking some time to build up the core members of Avalanche was great. Heck, this game actually has one of the most effective examples of connecting writing to gameplay that I've ever seen. It's the part where Cloud gets kicked out of Avalanche. That was brilliant. It was brilliant. It was unexpected, and Cloud was left wondering where to go, what to do. And so were you as the player. The party continues like all around you, but it's clear that you aren't welcome. So do I just leave? Where would I even go? Cloud wants to know, and so do you. And it was a beautiful moment. It was fantastic. And there were a lot of really cool moments. Some of the boss buildups were insanely well done. The phases of Guard Scorpion, Airbuster, and Arsenal were all just so good. And come on, that fight at the top of Shinra Tower, you know the one. When that music hit, whew, my God, I got shivers, dude. And Hamauzu and whoever else worked on the arrangements of the original soundtrack, they knocked it out of the park. Some of the new tracks felt a little out of place, but it wasn't the worst. But I mean, overall, this game's use of music was fantastic. The gameplay system itself, too, was really top shelf stuff. The different and often consistent enemy weaknesses, the way cover could be used. Heck, the combination of pressure, stagger, and phase transitions along with the soundtrack made the dynamic presentation like just mind-blowing. I mean, bro, Hell House, come on. So much fun. That last phase where it just takes off flying and the commentators are doing their over-the-top wrestling bit, and it's just fucking great, dude. But at the end of the day, the completely unnecessary elements of the plot just killed it for me. And even if they hadn't, the horrid pacing and quality issues were, because even on my first playthrough, there were very long segments, centered on but not limited to the odd jobs, where I was just bored out of my mind. I was considering dropping the game. I was sitting there, I'm like, I love the gameplay. I love some of the story beats that I've seen so far. The music is great. I like this world. I want to play it. Why am I having so little fun? I mean, Find My Kitties wasn't compelling content. It was phoned in fucking filler. And that sort of filler was exacerbated a great deal by another sort of filler, the forced walk, the shimmy, the crawl sections that would slow you down, and you would assume that they're there to hide loading, but they were way too frequent, man. It was all the time. It kills the pacing of the game. And beyond that, there's parts where literally everyone you pass in the street stops your progress to tell you how much you should love Erethisu. I'm going to take the extreme minority position on this, all right? But it's my opinion, and I believe it sincerely, and I'm going to say it. If this game had been 15 hours long and paced like the first Reactor, it would have been a fucking masterpiece. I'm talking about best game ever made. I mean, but it's not. It has tons of low quality filler that bog down the game to a crawl, and even if you try to skip the odd jobs, it's still repetitive and slow due to the level design issues. I mean, when they were making this, if a segment was fun to do twice, they made sure that you did it at least 4 times. You know, this is actually the first Final Fantasy that I bought on release since 10, and a lot of the reason for that was how disappointing 10's story was. And then there was the whole 10-2 thing, which has good gameplay, but I just can't stomach it. And if I really look at things carefully, and I'm really honest about it, I've disliked the writing on every project Nojima has been on, past from after 7. Everything after 7 that Nojima has written for, I haven't liked. And for 7, I was 14 years old, and I was still kind of iffy on some things back then. The projects that he works on are always just driven by one contrived plot device after another, and I end up not enjoying them. But Square keeps putting him in the position to do it, so it is what it is. The quality and pacing issues were a problem for me in any case, but writing is actually pretty important for this kind of RPG, and I'm just kind of done with it. I'm also kind of curious as to who they actually made this game for, because if it's the OG players, we're not 14 anymore. A more mature, grounded take on the story would make a whole lot more sense to me. And if it's for new players, that just raises even more questions, because there's a whole lot of shit that comes completely out of left field and it's completely unexplained. If so, not to mention that you probably wouldn't really get the real significance of the ending stuff either. So like, it's not really for new players, because if you haven't played 7, you're not really going to get most of the shit that they're talking about. Like, what's the relevance? What's the significance of it? You're not going to understand. You're just not going to get it. And if it's for older players, why the story with the juvenile like plot elements is it's oh man. And the two big problems for me with the conversation around this game's writing that honestly made me just not want to post this are, number one, people who say, well, you just don't understand it. To which I say, dude, I understand when a writer always has to find a new plot contrivance to move forward with a story. And I've seen this guy do it for years. So, no, I understand. And two, this is the other one. This is the one that really gets me is, well, you just wanted them to make the same game again. You didn't want them to change anything. You're a purist. You're a diehard old school. You just wanted the same. Why don't you go back and play Final Fantasy VII? Listen, I did not want them to make the same game again. I wanted them to put a spin on it. I liked the concept of fleshing out Shinra and Avalanche. I liked that. I liked the ideas of the added areas of the lab and Hojo's Tower. Hell, they could have killed any character in the game. They could have killed off any character in the game, and I would have been fine with it. Even Tifa. I would have been mad, but I would have accepted it. Like that anger would have been part of it. You know, that would have been I would have any character in the game, they could have killed them off and I would have been fine with it. If they could have just left them dead. Or if they didn't feel the need to bring time-traveling spirits into things, or Sephiroth, but now with mysterious knowledge of the future. It's not like I dislike them changing the game. I dislike the changes they made, and there's a big difference. It's kind of funny to me, though. A lot of these same story concepts pop up in other games and series, and sometimes they bother me, and sometimes they don't. I think a lot of it is how much emphasis the games put on it. Like, Dark Souls as a series has time travel and multiverse shit, and it doesn't bother me just because they don't really make a big deal out of it, so I just kind of let it go. But it's there. Hell, the best remake that Square has released this year, Trials of Mana, developed by Zine, kind of has a quote-unquote story. Like, it's there, but all the characters are just like stand-ins for concepts, really. Like, you have a knight and a werewolf and a thief. But it's fun and charming, and it was a far better remake of Seiken Densetsu 3 than what 7 has received. Speaking of that, James Swiney asked, please expand on your thoughts about studios making less AAA games and more lower-budget stylized games like Trials of Mana. I've actually been saying this for a while, but I think there's kind of a double A sweet spot that is being underused. A couple of examples from this year would be Trials of Mana and, well, maybe Streets of Rage 4. I say maybe because the main team for that game was apparently 5 people. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 member core development team, which is insane given the quality of that. Streets of Rage 4 is legit. It is legit. It's short because it's a beat 'em up. It's a traditional old school beat 'em up, but it is ridiculous quality. I thought that before I knew it was made by 5 people. Now I'm just like, what the fuck are you monsters? Anyway, my larger point is that huge AAA development projects are pretty much always going to be risk averse. Like, there's too much money involved to take chances on bold design choices in general. Additionally, you often encounter stories of ridiculous crunch on games where they have tons of high quality assets that have to adhere to strict launch windows, and you just have people run out of the industry, their health ruined with these fucking crunch situations. But from my perspective, it doesn't matter how many polygons the female lead's chest has if the writing has issues and the pacing is bad, or if the gameplay isn't fun, or if the balancing isn't right. And, so many AAAs miss the mark on all of these points. So I think that a small team with good fundamentals and a clever idea can make an amazing game. And you can fill it to the brim with content if the presentation of the content doesn't all have to be polished to ridiculous lengths. If someone made a game that looked like, say, Vagrant Story today, I'd play it in a heartbeat. Or at the very least, low poly models wouldn't turn me off of it as long as they were used well. And even from an investment perspective, I would be supporting smaller budget / staffed titles. Like, you risk less money and you can potentially make a really good return. The challenge is that you have to have the right people and the right idea. You have to understand games, and a lot of investors don't understand games. They might understand feature lists and strategic product plans that promise quote unquote Hollywood movies. That's a little jab, by the way, at Capcom's planning guidance, because literally one of their items in there, Hollywood movies. Anyway, but more seriously, I'm kind of predicting a coming rising nostalgia for PS1 and maybe PS2 era polygon budget models, like that kind of like that polygon count, that kind of resolution and degree of quality. Like, and with the tools available today, those sorts of projects can be put together by reasonably sized teams, I would say. I think that the industry needs to find balance between super creative indies and super polished AAAs, and I think that balance exists. You just need the vision, and I guess that's the hard part. My boy, this is L.I. Joe on Twitter, asked, where is Elden Ring? I knew he was going to ask that. Chatter Boys R also said, what's the current state of Fromsoft? So here's what I know. The following comes from Kitao-san of Fromsoft's marketing and communication department, and all-around great guy. I love it how Yamagiwa-san, the producer of Bloodborne, every year he tweets out a picture of Kitao-san in the hunter gear from Bloodborne. It's just like an in joke between the two. Anyway. But yeah, this is from Kitao-san from FromSoft. He says, and I quote, "We're very grateful to those who have shown concern for us during these troubling times. The world is going through a great ordeal, but we are continuing to develop from home to ensure you have something to enjoy once serenity is restored. In the meantime, please take care." End quote. My dudes, there's a pandemic. And most projects that are currently in development will experience some degree of delay due to production complications. And even more beyond that, may have altered launch windows due to the economic impacts of the pandemic. I genuinely, like, the U.S. unemployment numbers are astronomical. The debt that the U.S. government is taking out is astronomical. Not all of those jobs are going to magically come back even once things start reopening up. consumer demand is going to be low. I kind of mentioned that briefly when we were talking about Capcom. I think some people think that the games industry is recession proof, but it's not. Like, when money gets tight, and when money gets as tight as it's about to get, and it's about to get very tight for a lot of people, it's going to hurt the games industry as well. It's going to affect pretty much everything. And honestly, real talk, guys, I think that the world is in shock right now. People don't realize the real world ramifications of this sort of debt that the U.S. is taking on, or how many people are not going to be returning to employment in any sort of short order. The fact that we are sitting here right now talking about video games, like, from one perspective, I think it's really good that we have stuff like this that we can be excited about or interested in and talk about to take our minds off of things. But on the other hand, I've got this kind of like feeling of unease because I see a lot of people not understanding how serious the situation that the world's in right now. And so it's a major concern. Now, I don't have any behind the scenes knowledge here, but I can only say that I hope From's workers are safe and can still make progress on things while staying that way. I know you guys all feel the same. So let me get some EMB respects in chat here, please, for Fromsoft. And yeah, no, Elden Ring, we don't know. We don't know anything. They haven't announced anything. Like, I don't know. I don't have behind the scene knowledge, like I said, but I'm sure that it's been pushed back a little bit because of the pandemic, because they have been working from home. Like, they publicly said that they're working from home there. So that slows things down. Like, it just does. It is what it is. But yeah, as an aside, and I know this is going to blow some people's minds or even make some people mad, and I'm sorry if this makes you mad. I really, really am. But I'm honestly not super hyped on Elden Ring at the moment in any case. This isn't because of any like lack of quality or anything like that. And it's more because I'm just really feeling fatigue for kind of all the grotesque content. Like enemies that use their intestines as weapons or vomit blood as an attack, stuff like that. I just basically Bloodborne, Dark Souls 3, to a degree, Shadows Die Twice. Like, I love FromSoft. I love them. They're great guys. They are great people. They make great games. I always support them. But as much as I think that they advanced things with their lore presentation recently in Shadows, I feel like it was the best version of their stuff that they've done so far. I just felt a lot of fatigue for the sorts of worlds that they make. And that also applies to stuff like George Jar Jar Martin's Game of Thrones world. Like, I'm just tired of all the dark stuff. I don't mind dark themes, but if the tone of your world ranges from dark and grimy to grotesque, I'm just kind of tired of that for now. I'm more interested in other settings and worlds at the moment. This isn't a criticism, by the way. It's a personal feeling. Other folks may be sick of bright and fluffy stuff. Like, it kind of comes and goes with me. Like, though I have to say that overall I prefer dark stories in bright worlds. Like, I like for there to be something beautiful that makes the tragedy worthwhile. And, you know, I gotta say, I feel like FromSoft has gotten more grotesque since the Dark Souls 1 days, and I've gotten progressively more tired of it. Like, it took a long time to actually realize that for me. Playing Nioh 2 recently, I really appreciated the quirky moments and the humor that was involved. Not speaking to the quality of the story, but simply that the world itself had plenty of light, humor, and beauty, and I appreciated it. And when I talk about dark and light, by the way, I don't necessarily mean in terms of color. I'm talking about tone and variety, or lack thereof. And I feel the need to say this because I've been misinterpreted on this before. I'm not just talking about visuals, although visuals and sound are certainly a piece of that puzzle. I don't intend this as any sort of like big statement or final ultimatum of I'll never play Elden Ring or anything silly like that, but by the time the game comes out, I may be in a place where I'm looking for a bit of edge, and I'll buy it and support them in any case. I'm only offering a bit of explanation as to why when people go, yo dog, how about that Elden Ring hype? I'm just not really into that conversation. I just ain't feeling it. I don't feel it right now, man. And I hope that some of y'all can relate to this, because sometimes you're really into a certain type of media and sometimes you're just kind of done with it. And it's a cyclical thing. Hell, if I didn't stream, I would likely go months at a time without playing a game. But of course, I would then binge like crazy when I did find a new one to love. I mean, it is what it is. It is what it is. And I hope that some of y'all get where I'm coming from. Harbinger Ashy on Twitter said the amount of information is just about zero, but the only thing I'm truly excited for at this time is NieR. Now, I take no credit for this. I heard this from my man Fernando on Twitter. NieR replicant version 1.224744874139 ... 1.224744874139 is the square root of 1.5. So, like not one again, but not quite two. If there has ever been a way to signal, hey, this ain't going to be quite like the original and is going to kind of be a sequel in some ways, but not in others, this is the Yoko Taro way to do it. Bless. Once again, I heard that from Tingamaru on Twitter. I didn't come up with that one. That's going to do it for today's Immortal Poison Arrow. I realized there was probably a lot of negativity. I feel like some people are going to interpret it as being negativity, talking about Final Fantasy VII Remake or Elden Ring hype. I wanted to love Final Fantasy VII Remake. You can go back and watch my Final Fantasy VII OG playthrough that I've got on Twitch, and you can hear me kind of like talking about it and speculating and talking about the things that I love about that game. And you go from there, and you go from my excitement over the demo. You go back and watch the videos that I made for the demo and how excited and how fired up I was. I wanted to love that game. So, the fact that I don't want that to hurt other people's enjoyment of it. If you like it, you like it. I don't like the writing. I say things like it's shit writing, but that's just my opinion. Like, you can love it. You can think it's the best fucking thing on earth. I will disagree with you. And then with Elden Ring too, like, it's just kind of one of those things right now. I'm just, I am in a phase. I am in a place where I'm just not super fired up and hype and excited about it. So when people come to me like, aren't you fired up? Aren't you fired up? Aren't you fired up? It wears me the fuck out. It wears me out, man, because I feel like I'm supposed to be that guy. Like, people think I'm supposed to be that guy, but I just don't know. I guess I'm just not that guy right now. It doesn't mean I won't become that guy, but who I am at the moment. So yeah, I apologize if you guys have felt like some of the stuff was kind of negative. It's not intended that way. I'm not trying to kill anybody's buzz on anything. I'm just answering the questions. Just real talk. Normally when I have negative opinions about stuff, I try to just not talk about it. But some questions I can't dodge enough, so I had to answer them. So yeah, that's what that was. If you have a news topic that you want me to check out for the next Poison Arrow, Immortal Poison Arrow, hit me on Twitter at @EpicNameBro. That is the best way to get in touch with me. If you have a game trailer you want me to check out, if there's a song you want me to listen to, if there's some news you want me to discuss, at @EpicNameBro on Twitter. By the way, I will be streaming several interesting indie titles on Wednesday, as well as the Trials of Mana Challenge on Monday, Mana Mondays, and the Final Fantasy XII Challenge on Friday, Fantasy Fridays. So check those out. Now, it's time for EMB Radio.